So Expo, which you get with Create React Native App, has a bunch of APIs built in. You can see a bunch of them here. Map view is one of those. For example, this was Leland and some people at Airbnb made this nice maps component. So you can use Apple Maps or Google Maps on iOS or just Google Maps on Android. And as you can see, it's like pretty easy to add it to your app. And it's just there, full screen. That's great. And in general, you can kind of just browse the documentation for Expo and see like what kind of things are available. For the most part, there's similar components that are available. You just install them using React Native Link if you're not using Create React Native App or an Expo tool. But maybe it's worth like clarifying a little bit again, like what's the difference between like Expo and React Native and Create React Native App and I don't know what other million things. So Expo, thing I work on. React Native, kind of like subset of Expo, right? React Native has a lot of features. Its core is very focused, however, and what we're doing is making tools like the Expo client that you have on your phone and that you've been using throughout the workshop that make it easy to like get started with it, but also to just like do ongoing development where you can easily share what you're working on with a colleague somewhere else or with a friend. And one thing we didn't show about sharing, which can be particularly handy, let's see, React Europe. I don't have XD there. So if I just open this in XD or EXP, I think a few of you are using XD, but XD is essentially like an Electron app that does some nice things to show us the logs for any devices that are connected, show us the logs for the packager. And in addition to that, I'm currently signed in, not Brent. So if I hit publish here, what it will actually do is start building the JavaScript bundle. So we discussed bundles a little bit earlier. This builds one of those big bundles that's just like one file per platform, probably about 1 megabyte. It really depends on what you have in your app. So it just built the JavaScript one. Now it's building, or the iOS one rather, now it's building the Android one. And once that's done, hangs on 100% for a minute, goes on and does some other stuff. So what this does, I've already published this so I can just show you. The result is React Europe is you get a URL like this. I didn't specify an icon, so it's just a blank thing. And you can open it in Expo. If it's on your phone, that just opens it up in the Expo app right away. Otherwise, type in some stuff if you want to get a URL on your phone. So that's kind of publishing. That's, yeah, not a whole lot to it. Pretty straightforward to do. So it's nice if you want to make something and share it with people. Now everyone has my phone number. Great. So like I said, that's available here. This URL, if you want to open that in the Expo app, that would work. Another thing that you could do is actually build like the standalone app for it. So I could do like exp build Android, for example. And this uses our build service because, as you know, at this point with Create React Native App, or if you just used XD or EXP, you haven't had any like interactions with Android Studio or with Xcode, and so there's no, you know, it's like, how do you get a binary that you actually put somewhere? So if you do this, you run exp build Android or exp build iOS, this first publishes like what we just did before, and then it sends off a request to our build cluster where we have machines that just basically take your app's JavaScript and take the Expo SDK, build a APK or an IPA for you, which are the formats respectively for Android and iOS, build them, and then give them to you. So you can then take those and just upload those to the Play Store or App Store. Any questions about that? No? Pretty straightforward. Are you guys curious about like push notifications, something like that? kind of neat. Yeah? Okay, let's look at push notifications really quickly. So if I create a new project in XDE, I mean, there are so many push notification providers. You can use Firebase, you can use OneSignal, you can use whatever, a million other things. We also have a thing that you can use with Expo for that. So if you do like my new thing, this will just create a project with some basic kind of boilerplate. And people who were paying attention during the Q&A were like, ah, you're a hypocrite, but you know. So actually I'll use VS Code. Push notifications. There's this thing. So we have this function here called register for push notifications async. So what it does, first it asks for permissions. So we have this permissions model in Expo. There's something similar in React Native Core for Android, but not for iOS. So you kind of just have to do that on your own or link another library. This is actually, I mean, not to like toot my own horn with respect to Expo. I don't know if anyone in Europe understands that expression. It's not dirty or anything. It's just like not to talk myself up. But Expo, it's like super easy to push notifications. Like this is a brand new app that I created that just has this little bit of boilerplate where you ask for permissions. If it's not granted, you return. Otherwise, you get the device push token and then just send that push token over to your endpoint. And an example of an endpoint that deals with this is, if I can go here, maybe some people know Rails. So I just have this simple push server example. And all you need to do when you send the push notification is require this SDK to publish, pass in the token that you have, pass a message and some data, and then it's sent. So Expo takes care of determining whether you're on Android or iOS and where it should be sending it to APNS or SNS or whatever. And all you have to do is keep this token associated with a user and send this. What's happening here is actually just a post request to our endpoint. So if you open this QR code, I don't know if maybe that's not big enough here. Let's try this. If you open this QR code and, oh my God, and go into the app on your phone, then, because push notifications don't work in simulators, then you'll see that you're prompted to accept push notifications. And if you accept that, then you'll get a push notification and it'll just show up in the app. And that was all done using the two files that I just showed you. And then once you do a build of your standalone app, you don't have to do anything else for it to work. It just continues working. Of course, if you're not using Expo, there are different ways to get set up. But the general idea of push notifications is that you have some token that identifies your user, and then you send that token along with some data to some endpoint, whether that's Apple's or Google's endpoint, along with, like I said, some data, and that then is sent to the device. So let's see. I think some people are loading it. 48%, 49%, 51%. Takes a while to build for the first time, but you know. Does anyone have questions about push notifications? Like I went over it quickly because obviously there's not really like time to like drill into a lot of details. But this is essentially, like I said, if you create a new project in XD and go to the tabs template, you could see this file, and this is what you have to do for it. Someone want to shout out like something else you're curious to see more things for? Permissions, someone say? Oh, that's Adam. Okay, fine, we can look at that. Unless someone else has something. Graphing library? Sure, so have you ever used victory charts? So that actually works with this as well. So let's see, I'll go to, we have an example. So there's this repo, I've just started doing this. I blatantly copied the idea off of Next.js where they have an examples directory prefixed with whatever, and then inside of that you could see like an example of what it is and what's it for, how to run it, and whatever. So I'll just run this one locally. Oh my god, this is taking forever. Okay, so let's go to victory. Should load. Okay, loaded for one person. So that one person got to see this, but sorry, I'm going to close that now. Okay. Let's just do this. So yeah, victory charts works with React Native and works with Expo also out of the box. If you just, what do you have to do? I think you just have to install the Victory Native package. Yeah, it's the only dependency that you need. And then it will work. Opening project. Other examples in here that are kind of interesting are Facebook auth, right? Example of how to do that here. Post-publish hooks is something specific to Expo. Look into that if you want. Socket.io works. WebSocket is polyfilled in React Native, so you can just drop in Socket.io and use that. Almost downloading here. All right, so here's whatever, some chart thingy. Yeah, I think they all just work in this, yeah. Right, like these are all, this is the example from the Victory Native repo. And I guess it just works. I haven't looked into it too much, I just copied and pasted the code in. And it worked, so. Yeah, that seems to be pretty good. What else is there? Let's look at the docs for a second. Wrong one. Local notifications is another thing. Actually, it's probably worth talking about web browser a little bit too, because something that's often quite confusing for people when they're coming to mobile is differentiating between a web view and something called like SF Safari View Controller or Chrome Custom Tabs. So web views are things that are like embedded inside as like a view inside of your app. A SF Safari View Controller, Chrome Custom Tabs, those things open modally and kind of take up the full screen and are essentially like a web browser window, but that is that can kind of I guess be launched from in a way that it looks sort of like it's part of your app still from your app. And so that sounds super boring because like whatever, it's just a website. And but actually it's really useful for OAuth because it shares cookies with your mobile device browser. So If you use a web view, probably you've used apps where you say log in with Facebook and then it opens this web view that looks all weird and it asks you to type your username and password and then you delete the app and never use it again. So web browser is a little bit different because since it shares cookies, if you're logged into a website in your browser already, then you can just log in like that with the web browser module. So this one here, I think, just shows opening Expo IO, but I can show you what that looks like really quick. There's an example app of using the web browser module to sign in with Auth0. So Auth0 is a really common thing. Lots of people ask, do you have Auth0 lock? Because there's a React Native Auth0 lock module. We do not include that because you can build a UI and that's fine, and their UI is implemented natively, and we don't think that's necessary. As you can see here, though, this is kind of what the web browser thing looks like, right? Opens up this thing, shares cookies, you press done, and it just goes back to your app. Or you can redirect back to your app. Yeah. What other cool stuff is there? Expo has an audio API. I guess you can use that if you want. I don't know. Nobody else has any requests for things to look at? Yeah. Sure. Yeah. So what I did when I hit publish is like you just get code push functionality for free with Expo. As soon as you create a project, you can hit publish and it's done. If you build a standalone, publish the standalone to the App Store, and then go into XD or EXP again and hit publish, it'll update the App Store version to the latest version without you needing to submit a new binary. Yeah. So code push, I think that's something we actually intended to talk about, but we didn't get around to it in the QA. Code push, for people who aren't familiar with it, is a tool from Microsoft that works with Cordova and React Native apps. And essentially what it is a way for you to publish your JavaScript bundles somewhere, and then an SDK inside of your app for checking if there's a new version of your JavaScript, downloading it, and then using that instead of the old version of your JavaScript. So it allows you to do what's commonly referred to as over-the-air updates, because you don't have to go through the App Store submission, but instead you just publish something to a server of your choosing, and then download that from the app and sort of sideload it, as it were. Yeah. 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 Yeah, that's a really good question because there's a lot of confusion about that at the time. So as far as I know from Expo and from people at Microsoft who work at CodePush, who we had a lot of contact with while this kind of event happened. So basically, to summarize things for people, what happened was was it 3 months ago or so, there was a series of apps that were removed from the App Store or rejected from the App Store for submissions because of some stuff that they did that was against the terms of service for the App Store. And a lot of people thought that this was maybe related to React Native, even though none of the apps actually used React Native. They thought it was then maybe related to just like over-the-air updates, and that was kind of true. But there's a fundamental difference between how React Native works and how these other tools work. What was the name of the tool? Someone could tell me. Rollout was the name of the tool, yeah. So what Rollout does is essentially exposes like any native API to you from JavaScript without it being possible for Apple to statically analyze up front and know that you're going to use that API. That's kind of different from React Native. Actually, it's very different from React Native because as James was explaining, if you want to expose a native API, you then have to create like this module that then calls into it, and then your JavaScript will call into that module, which does that. You can absolutely create a module that does exactly what Rollout did, but then you're just going to get rejected from the App Store. There's no reason that React Native is any more, I guess, at risk compared to other tools, because it doesn't use those APIs. And these APIs just allow essentially for dynamically calling into any native API on the platform. So there were, at the time that this happened, there was an app that was rejected, and they created an issue on the React Native repository, and everybody got all scared. Oh no, is this going to stop working? It turned out that they included some library that itself depended on Rollout, and so they removed that library, and then they were fine. But they were like, well, it was React Native, but it wasn't. As far as we know, no React Native app within 2 years has been rejected for anything related to that. And the Apple terms of service do state that you are allowed to ship code that executes in JavaScript core after submission or over the air. So this is well documented in the code push documentation, which is from Microsoft. So I'm just sort of saying, hey, that's a name with credibility. So, you know, it seems to be okay. And really, there's so many apps do this in so many ways. Yeah, talk to me later. I could talk for a long time about it. The answer is React Native isn't affected now. Was I going to do something or what? I don't remember what I was going to do. Yep. If you went on Hacker News and read the comments, probably everyone would say that you're silly to use React at all if you care about Facebook suing you. But I don't think Facebook has ever sued anybody over usage of React. It's up to your lawyers, really. Like my company, Expo, we use React extensively and depend on it. Airbnb does, you know, Microsoft does, whoever. And it's sure the license is a little bit weird. It would be nice if it was just sort of like MIT or whatever. The patent clauses people like to point out is a little bit strange, but it's really up to your lawyers to determine whether that's an acceptable thing for you to use. And it seems like most companies are okay with that, given that it's hard to think of websites that don't use React these days. So I guess I'm on one right now, but yeah.
You're talking about the Apple developer that pushes the App Store.
Mm-hmm.
But what with your Apple Enterprise developer, can you, for example, put an application to a mobile device?
So the question was, with the Apple Enterprise license, can you like essentially build an app and then share it without going through the App Store? Yeah, like it's the exact same as with usual. That usual provisioning profile. You can just share the app and install it and whatever. And React Native doesn't impact that at all. Yeah, that's actually how we used to distribute Expo before we released an initial version. So, and a popular app, maybe some of you use, called Gyroscope, did that for a long time as well. Was there any stuff from earlier that you were interested in that? I guess I didn't show anything about fonts, like how to use a custom font. There we go. Apollo and GraphQL. Sure, yeah, we can look at that. Okay, so we have about half an hour. Let's see if we can make the app that we were building use that in half an hour. I'm going to guess yes, because I'm optimistic, but let's see what we have here. Got some junk, authentication. I'm just going to stash that. I don't want it to mess me up. Okay, so we have this GraphQL endpoint. I'm going to unplug my computer so I can open messages with Patrick and not share them with the world and find what the GraphQL endpoint is. And then I will plug it back in. But so what I'll show you first is There is something called graphical. Where is Patrick? I'll plug it back in a second. Yeah, I'm plugged in on purpose. Yeah. Patrick is the organizer of the conference, so just so you know. And I think he sent me this a long time ago. And I cleared my history before coming up here because I'm not a fool. Not to say I had anything to hide, but you know. Are people familiar at all with GraphQL, you know, like general idea of it, or should I explain that also? Actually, I think most people even indicated on the, oh, I think I got it. Nice. Yeah, I think most people indicated that they were familiar with GraphQL, or at least interested. I think there was something like 20 or like 10, 15% of people said they would rather use REST, so that's why we just decided let's just do neither and give you data. So everyone's happy or sad or whatever. Okay, so we have this, oh, there's this history anyways. We have this GraphQL endpoint. We use this thing called graphical for it, so I can then press Command and Enter, and it does a query and gives me all the data that we're using for this app, actually. Which endpoint does this actually hit? Maybe I can check it in here. I'm not even sure if that works. So what I want to find out now is what is the actual, okay, GQL. So there we go. So this is the endpoint that we want. So we can go into here. Let's do yarn add Apollo clients. And copy some boilerplate stuff in here. Yeah, that's what we want. React Apollo. Ooh, yarn. So you're probably familiar with the concept of a provider if you've used Redux or something like that before. Essentially what it does is establishes some context in the terms of React context, so that components that are arbitrarily nested inside of it can grab some object or some data off of the context and use it without having to pass it through props explicitly through every component. So provider is usually used for things like this. It's used for navigation as well, often. So we'll do React Apollo. Okay, now this is our endpoint. Go to app.js. Import. I'm just going to copy and paste this. And Apollo client. So I need to do this guy. Network interface is create network interface, this thing. And we'll summon our Apollo, or rather our GraphQL endpoint there. So we have a client, and we have a network interface. We don't have to say that. We just say const client equals that. Wait, no, we did that already. This.client equals. Okay, so we have a client, and now we need to wrap our app with that. So we can do here, Apollo provider, client equals client. Let's move this outside of that. Okay. I forgot to import.
Create a network database.
Oh, good point. Yeah. Is that on Apollo client, I think? Yeah, it's on Apollo client. Oh, I guess it's probably exposed on that also, but okay. Yeah, you're right. Boop, boop, boop. Yeah, let's do that. Okay, so we have this network interface, and we have a client using that network interface. And then we set up a Apollo provider around this, and we have a root navigator. So root navigator, we really care about the schedule screen here, because that's where we're getting our data and putting it into that thing. So actually, I think I need to install more than just that. Post. I think I also need to install GraphQL tag. Maybe not. Wait. Yeah, I do. Yarn add GraphQL tag. If I'm not mistaken, that is correct. Yep. So now I need to essentially, this GraphQL function, what it does is you give it a GraphQL query, and then it essentially is a higher order component, right? The second thing you pass in is the component that you want to wrap and pass the data into. So I'm going to get rid of export default on this and do export default GraphQL, and then it was GQL. Sorry? Oh yeah. Thank you. This is good. Everyone's just catching my mistakes. It's fantastic. So if we just take this and throw this in here, why not? And then inside of here, we'll keep that data in for now, but let's maybe display like a loading indicator, even though really at this point we aren't actually getting data. Well, we are getting the data, we're just not using it. Let's do style sheet dot absolute fill. Align items, center, justify, and center. So this will show an activity indicator on both iOS and Android. Did I do something wrong? Someone saying, no? Okay. Maybe I did, yeah. A valid React element must be, oh, my battery's dying. I didn't pass in the component as the second argument, or the second function, GraphQL. What was it called? Schedule list screen, I think. Yeah. Okay, so it's showing that, but let's only show that when it's loading. So let's do like, if not this.props.data.loading, return. Otherwise, return this thing. Sorry? I'm not calling. Oh, yeah, of course. I'm so glad I have you guys helping right now. This is just, would be a very difficult time. Okay, so you saw that like showed up and then went away really fast. So that's really cool with Apollo. It's like, it's just telling us that we just drop this query in, and then we're like, okay, wrap this component. And then I just went ahead and was like, yeah, I can do that. And fetch the data and set this loading value on the prop, on the data prop to say, yes, it's loading. And then when it finished, it got rid of that, and then we were able to respond to that. Okay, so we have a bunch of data right now, and you might wonder, like, oh, what does the data look like? Well, it looks exactly like this, so we can kind of know what to do with that. Thankfully, I actually just did that originally with the data, so we had the response like this. So I can just take out this thing. I'm not going to do this in an efficient way. You could, we could do that another time. So I'm actually going to process all of the data every time. That's fine. And do this. So sorted, yeah, this one. And I'm going to move that in here. Let's make a big change here and delete all that. And paste this in here. And import Lodash. And I guess in this case, probably we don't want to do anything, so we'll say if not this.props. So really, this maybe render loading thing, I changed my mind about that. We're definitely going to render loading. So if this.props.data.loading, we put that there. Otherwise, we do this stuff with the data. And get rid of that. Okay, so if it's loading, we show a loading indicator. Otherwise, we're going to do a lot of stuff with this data. So response, we this, .props, .data, .events, 0.schedule. I don't know, maybe that'll work. Attempted to assign, nope, didn't work. Lodash, tab, array, reduce, schedule, list screen 40. Chain, this, .props, what am I doing here? Can anyone tell me what I'm doing wrong here, maybe? Stop props the data. Let's bail out early. And just do some simple thing like console log, props.data.events. All right, so we're getting like all this data back. Schedule 0, that seems right. Schedule. All right, got the schedule, lots of it. And we want to sort those by the start date, which seems like a valid thing to do. I feel like something is... Oh, that'd be weird if Lodash did that. Okay, yeah, that would make sense though. Okay, that's kind of messy. Do you know if Lodash has a sort that does not mutate things? No? That is terrible. I'm sure there are good reasons. I don't mean that's terrible. I'm sure there are very great reasons. Lodash sort without mutation. 15 minutes in so far, and I'll, kind of, it's not bad. He's what? Ramda. I think we'd spend a few hours figuring out how to do that in that case. He laughs too. He's like, yeah. Oh yeah, okay, I guess we could just do slice and, sure, I'll just follow the exact advice that was given to me instead of ignoring it. But then it's not a function. Oh, schedule, yeah, of course. Sorry guys and gals. Okay, we're getting somewhere. Parse custom date string. So a weird thing about this GraphQL API, I have no idea why it's done like this, but the date strings, I don't know what date format it's in. I have no idea. So I had to make something, because JavaScript wouldn't parse it, and Moment, even like Moment wouldn't parse it. So I just split it by spaces and then built an ISO date from it. Thankfully, I did that in advance. Parse custom date string. Is that the only thing I need to import? Oh, we can, yeah. Oh, yeah, I called it something differently. Let's just call these events for Thursday. Yeah, there we go. Get it off from GraphQL. I mean, it's horribly inefficient what I'm doing in this render function. Let's not, kid ourselves there. But I think we all know at this point how to make that better. Either way, that's pretty cool. It's all coming from a GraphQL endpoint now. And this is, by extension, also coming from the endpoint because we're just passing it in through the route. So that took 17 minutes, so that's not bad. Apollo client's pretty good, right? This is something that Leland was talking about, Apollo at Airbnb. We use it at Expo on our client, so the app that you were using uses it. And I guess a little bit of background on Apollo on what it is. Like, you can make GraphQL queries to any GraphQL endpoint using just like fetch or whatever, and just has to be a post request with like the body in a certain format. Or you can use something like Loca, which I think is maybe, I don't know if it's still alive or whatever, but like simple things that just do queries and then give you the data back. But what Apollo does, so Apollo calls itself like a caching GraphQL client. And that's really one of the big things with GraphQL is the ability to understand the structure of your data, and because it's all in this format of a graph, and kind of share different pieces of the tree and combine them such that like maybe you're not making more requests than you need to, or it understands if you're asking for some data, if you already have that data because of some other request that included it as part of its query. And it kind of handles a lot of the stuff that you would normally have to do with Redux, because with Redux, you might have to build a reducer for all these things. And if you want to like start caching things, say, okay, fetch this thing, now throw this in, or whatever, submit this, or dispatch this event, and these reducers respond to it, update themselves, and then you end up with this state tree. But actually, Apollo uses Redux internally, Apollo client, and kind of tries to manage that for you as much as possible. But you can also use Redux in conjunction with it. So you can make Apollo client's GraphQL reducer a reducer on your greater Redux store, because often it's useful to keep some like client-specific state just inside of Redux on your own. I can push this if you care. It's like hideous, but sure, I'll push it. Yep. Yeah. So the question was, Leland talked about making a native Apollo client for iOS and Android. And so the reason for that is so that you have shared cache between the native code that uses Apollo and GraphQL and the JavaScript code that uses it. I think people who looked into this a lot, such as people at Facebook, while working on Relay, and you could talk to, I'm sure the bunch of them will be here tomorrow. They can tell you more of the details, but my understanding is that it's easier to share the cache when it's stored natively and like thinking sort of like native first than if you're like thinking JavaScript first and then have native and your existing native code reach into JavaScript and get the cache data from there. That's my understanding of it anyways. I don't think it was anything to do with limitations of the JavaScript side of things. Cool. Yeah, so I guess we can get out 10 minutes early unless anyone wants to ask more stuff. I will be around for the next 2 days also, and I will be standing here for a lot of that time, unfortunately. See, I have MC on my sleeve, which means it's not the last that you've heard of me. So, unless you're not coming to the conference, then it probably is. So. Okay. All right, thanks.